My mother-in-law was sitting in my kitchen island in my bathrobe, eating yogurt out of my favorite ceramic bowl, when she told me I needed to find somewhere else to sleep that night. "The lake house belongs to family now," she said, "and you're not really family, are you? Not in the ways that matter." My husband had been dead for 14 months. I'd paid off the mortgage on that lake house with the life insurance check, the one I cried over for 3 nights before I could bring myself to deposit it. And there she was, scraping the bottom of the bowl with my grandmother's silver spoon, smiling at me like I was a contractor who'd come to fix a leaky faucet and overstayed. Before I tell you exactly how I emptied her life out from under her without ever raising my voice, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments, what's the most disrespectful thing someone has ever done to you in your own home? I'll be reading every single one tonight. While I drink coffee in the kitchen she swore I'd never see again. I drove 40 miles back to Burlington that night because I didn't have anywhere else to go. The lake house was supposed to be the place I went to get away. My condo in the city had been sold 6 months earlier. The proceeds rolled into the lake property because the grief counselor said making a clean break would help. So when my late husband's mother and his younger sister showed up unannounced on a Friday afternoon with 3 suitcases and a U-Haul trailer parked at the bottom of the gravel drive, I had nowhere to retreat to. I checked into a Hampton Inn off I-89 and sat on the edge of the bed in my coat, holding my phone, scrolling through nothing. The room cost $190. I remember the exact number because it kept blinking on the receipt I'd printed at the front desk, and every time I looked at it I felt my jaw lock. $190 to sleep 3 blocks from a Cracker Barrel while my husband's family rifled through my linen closet and decided which of his old flannels to keep. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window of that Hampton Inn and watched the parking lot lights flicker, and I tried to understand how I'd ended up here. But honestly, I already knew. I'd known for years. I just refused to look at it. In my husband's family, there were 2 kinds of women. There was his sister, the one his mother referred to in church newsletters as her miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages, raised like spun glass. She had a daughter from a man who left 2 weeks after the test came back positive, and she had spent her entire adult life floating between her mother's house, her ex-boyfriend's house, and whichever cousin would take her for a few months. And then there was me, the one who married in, the one who put my husband through his last year of medical school by working 60-hour weeks at a brokerage firm in Manhattan, the one who held his hand in hospice and signed papers I still can't think about without feeling sick. I learned what I was to them 4 years ago when my husband's father had a stroke. The medical bills were catastrophic. My mother-in-law called me at work, sobbing into the phone, saying they were going to lose the house in Stowe. I wired her $68,000 from my own savings, not from our joint account, mine. The money I'd been quietly setting aside since I was 23. My husband didn't even know I had it. I told her it was a gift, that she didn't owe me anything, that family helps family. 8 months later, I was at her birthday party in that same Stowe house, and there was a brand new Lexus SUV in the driveway with a dealer plate still on it. Not for her, for my sister-in-law. A push present, my mother-in-law said, even though my niece was already 2.5 years old by then. "She needs something safe to drive the baby around in," my mother-in-law said, beaming, while my father-in-law sat in his recliner with the same hospital bracelet still on his wrist because he'd refused to cut it off. They didn't have an extra $48,000 for a luxury SUV. They had my $48,000. The money I'd sent to keep them off the street had been redirected, the second the urgency passed, into a vehicle for the daughter who couldn't hold down a waitressing job. That was the night I realized something I'd been refusing to say out loud. They didn't think of my money as mine. They thought of it as a resource pool, a family fund I was holding in escrow until they decided what to do with it. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I was a line item, and the second my husband died, the line item came due. When they showed up at the lake house with the U-Haul, they weren't visiting. They were collecting. The sister was pregnant again. 6 months along, second baby, second father, same story. My mother-in-law made sure I noticed the belly the second she stepped out of the car. She put her hand on it, theatrically, like she was warding off something. They needed somewhere safe to nest, she told me. Somewhere with good air. The lake house was perfect, and I had so much room. I lived alone, after all. It was selfish, really, to keep all that space to myself when family needed it. I called my attorney first thing Saturday morning. His name is Mr. Halverson, and I'd hired him originally to handle the probate when my husband died. He's a small man with a quiet voice and the disposition of a knife that's been sharpened for 30 years. I told him what happened. I told him I wanted them out by Monday. I wanted state troopers. I wanted the sheriff. I wanted whatever the Vermont equivalent of the cavalry was. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "You have a problem and it's worse than you think." I asked him what he meant. "The deed is in my name," I said. "I paid off the mortgage. I have receipts going back 6 years." He said, "That doesn't matter right now." He said, "When did they arrive?" "Friday at 3 p.m., I told him. "And you left voluntarily," he said. "You went to a hotel." "Yes," I said. "I didn't want a hotel." "Yes," I said. "I didn't want to fight in front of the neighbors." He sighed. He said, "In Vermont, once a person has been allowed to occupy a residence for any length of time without a formal trespass notice issued at the moment of entry, they can claim a colorable right of occupancy." He said, "Your mother-in-law is going to argue she had a verbal agreement with your late husband. There's no one to contradict her." He said, "Your sister-in-law is in her 3rd trimester." He said, "No judge in this state is going to evict a pregnant woman in February. We're looking at 6 months minimum to get them out through the courts. Maybe 9. And in the meantime, they have the run of your home." I sat in that Hampton Inn parking lot with the phone pressed to my ear and I felt the bottom of the world drop out. 9 months. They would empty the place. They would sell my husband's coin collection. They would burn through the propane. They'd be living off my electricity and my well water, and there was nothing the law would do about it for the better part of a year. He said, "They're going to push you toward a settlement. They want you to pay them to leave. That's the play. That's always the play." He said, "Families like this, they don't break in. They get invited in, and then they refuse to leave until you write a check." I hung up the phone. I drove to a diner. I ordered coffee and a plate of eggs I didn't eat, and I sat in the booth and I watched the snow start to fall over the parking lot, and I let myself feel it, all of it, the grief, the rage, the disbelief that the woman who'd held my hand at my husband's funeral was now wearing my bathrobe and eating yogurt out of my dead grandmother's bowl. And then I got very, very calm. Because here's the thing about grief. Grief makes you stupid for a while. It makes you slow. It makes you hand people $68,000 when you should have asked questions. But once you come out the other side of it, once the fog lifts, what's left underneath is a kind of clarity that scares people. I had spent 14 months in that fog. The fog was gone now. They had ripped it off me when they walked into my house. I worked in financial compliance for a hedge fund. My entire career was built on one skill: finding the inconsistency. Finding the place where what someone said in one document didn't match what they said in another. Finding the lie buried in the paperwork. I had spent 12 years getting paid very well to do exactly one thing, and now my husband's family had given me a target. I needed to find their greed. I needed to find the thing they wanted so badly they'd sign anything to get it. And then I needed to make them sign the wrong thing. For 4 days I did nothing. I went dark. I didn't return my mother-in-law's calls. I didn't respond to my sister-in-law's text messages, which had started arriving Saturday afternoon and were a fascinating mixture of fake concern and naked threat. "We just want to talk. We're worried about you. You know Mom isn't going to back down on this. The baby deserves stability." I let them sit in the warmth of my house and drink my wine and post pictures of the lake on social media. I let them get comfortable. I needed them comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. Comfortable people sign things without reading them. On the 5th morning, I called my mother-in-law. I used a phone number she didn't recognize, a Google Voice line I'd set up that morning. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello," she said, suspicious. "Hi," I said. And I made my voice small. I made it the voice of the 26-year-old girl she'd first met. The girl who used to bring her flowers and apologize for things that weren't her fault. "I'm sorry," I said. "I've been thinking. You're right. I can't do this alone. The lake house is too much for me. It was always meant for a family. I want to make this right." There was a pause. Then she said, "Oh, sweetheart," in the voice she used when she was about to take something. "I'm so glad you came around. I want to put the lake house in your name," I told her. "Yours and my late father-in-law's. That way, it stays in the family forever. The baby will have somewhere to grow up, and I'll just visit on holidays, like family should." Now she was excited. I could hear it. She was already calculating. The lake house was worth $1,600,000, give or take, in this market. She was about to inherit it for free. "But there's a problem," I told her. "A legal one. My attorney says if I just transfer the deed, the IRS will treat it as a gift, and the gift tax on a property of this value will be around $400,000. You'll have to sell the house just to pay the tax bill." She made us sound like a small animal. "We can't afford that," she said. "We're on Social Security." "I know," I said. "So my attorney came up with a workaround. We have to make it look like you bought it. We have to make it look like the down payment, the original $312,000 we put down 6 years ago, actually came from you, like you'd given us the money in cash to use, and we were just holding the title for you." "How does that work?" she asked. Slowly, carefully. "It's just a form," I told her. "It's called a source of funds affidavit. It's a sworn statement that the original down payment money was yours, that you'd been saving it in cash and gave it to us at closing. If you sign that, the IRS treats this as a return of your equity, not a gift. No tax. The house is yours free and clear." She hesitated. And here was the moment I'd been waiting for. The smart villain check. She wasn't completely stupid. She knew how to smell a trap if the trap had cheese on top. "Will the government see this?" she asked. "I don't want anybody from the IRS poking around our finances." "No," I lied, gentle as snowfall. "It's a real estate document. It stays with the title company and the county recorder. It never crosses an IRS desk unless someone subpoenas it. It's a formality. Everyone who transfers property within a family does it." I held my breath. "Okay," she said. "Send it over. We can come in Wednesday." I hung up. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and I looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room, and I did not smile, because what I was about to do wasn't joyful. It was just necessary. While Mr. Halverson drafted the affidavit, I went to work on my real research. I logged into Pacer, the federal court record system. I searched my mother-in-law's full legal name. I searched my late father-in-law's name, even though he'd been dead for almost 2 years. And I started reading. I wasn't looking for money. I knew they didn't have any. I was looking for the absence of money. I was looking for them to have already told a story to a court about how broke they were. I found it on the 3rd page of search results. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing from the District of Vermont, filed 19 months ago, 3 months after my father-in-law's stroke, 2 months after I wired her the $68,000. Discharged 11 months later. I paid the small fee to download the petition. I read every page. She had walked into federal bankruptcy court and sworn under penalty of perjury that she had no significant assets. Schedule AB, line 17, cash on hand, 0. Line 18, deposits of money, $2,200 in a checking account. Line 20, retirement and pension accounts, 0. She'd discharged $91,000 in credit card debt and medical bills. The bankruptcy trustee had verified her assets, found nothing, and signed off. 11 months ago, my mother-in-law had stood in front of a federal judge and sworn she was destitute, and in 5 days, she was going to walk into Mr. Halverson's office and swear on video that she had given me $312,000 in cash 6 years ago. She couldn't be both. She couldn't be broke for the bankruptcy court and rich for the title company. If she signed by affidavit, she was confessing on video to federal bankruptcy fraud. The penalty for that is up to 5 years in federal prison and up to $250,000 in fines, plus the immediate revocation of her bankruptcy discharge, which would mean every dollar of those debts came back with interest, and her assets, including her car and her share of the Stowe house, would be subject to seizure to pay them. I forwarded the bankruptcy file to Mr. Halverson with one line: "The trap is set. Book the videographer." The conference room at Halverson's firm sat on the fourth floor of an old brick building on Church Street, overlooking the pedestrian mall. It had been renovated to look intimidating. Dark wood, heavy chairs, a long oval table with a single pitcher of water at the center. I sat at the far end. Mr. Calm. Halverson sat to my right. A court reporter set up her stenotype machine in the corner. A videographer adjusted a tripod with a high-definition camera pointed at the empty chairs across from me. This wasn't a real estate closing. We had told my mother-in-law it was. I'd told her that because the lake property was on a private association road, the title couldn't be cleanly transferred without sworn testimony documenting the chain of funds. I told her that this was standard for properties over $1 million. It wasn't. The title company didn't care. But the federal government was going to care a great deal. At 10 o'clock sharp, the elevator dinged. They came in like they were collecting an inheritance. My mother-in-law wore a wool coat I recognized, one I'd given her 3 Christmases ago. My sister-in-law waddled behind her, one hand on the belly, the other holding a Dunkin' Donuts cup. She didn't acknowledge me. She looked out the window at the church spire and made a face that suggested the view wasn't impressive enough for what she was about to receive. They sat. My mother-in-law looked at me with the warm, distant expression of a queen tolerating a servant. "Let's get this done," she said. "The drive-in was awful. The roads need salt." Mr. Halverson cleared his throat. "Mrs.," he said, using her last name, "before we proceed, I need to read the standard advisement. This is a sworn affidavit. The court reporter is transcribing every word. Video is being recorded for the official file. Do you understand?" "We understand," my mother-in-law said, waving her hand. "Just give us the form." Mr. Halverson didn't move. He held up the document. "Mom, as an officer of the court, I'm required to advise you. You are about to swear, under penalty of perjury, that you personally provided $312,000 in cash to your son and daughter-in-law on or about the date listed for the down payment on the lake property. If this statement is found to be untrue, or if it conflicts with any other sworn financial statement you have made in any other federal proceeding, you could face felony perjury charges and additional federal charges related to those proceedings. Do you understand this advisement?" The room was completely silent. The hum of the camera filled the air like a refrigerator in an empty house. This was her exit ramp. This was the moment a smart villain would say, "Hold on. What other federal proceedings?" and walk out. This was the moment a careful person would ask to call their own attorney. But she didn't hear an advisement. She heard a formality. She heard her daughter-in-law's lawyer reading legal boilerplate, the way the woman at the bank reads disclosures while you sign for a loan. She had spent her entire life being told that paperwork was for other people. That rule's bent for her. That family was thicker than ink. She laughed. She actually laughed. "I know what money I gave my own son," she said, picking up the pen. "We saved that money for 30 years. Cash in a fire safe in the basement. Uncle Sam doesn't need to count my pennies." Mr. Halverson didn't blink. "State your full legal name for the record and sign the document, please." She said her name. She signed with a flourish, the way you sign a Christmas card. My sister-in-law leaned over and patted her mother's hand. Finally, she whispered. They sat back. My mother-in-law smiled at me for the first time all morning. "There," she said. "Now you can sign over the deed, and we can stop dragging this out." I didn't touch the deed transfer document sitting in front of me. I didn't even look at it. I looked at Mr. Halverson. He nodded once. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick blue file folder, and he placed it on the table on top of the affidavit my mother-in-law had just signed. "What is that?" my mother-in-law asked. The smile was still on her face, but her eyes had gone flat. "That," I said, My voice steadier than I'd expected. Is the Chapter 7 bankruptcy petition you filed in the District of Vermont 19 months ago. The one where you swore, under penalty of perjury, that you had no cash, no significant assets, and no undisclosed sources of funds. The one where you discharged $91,000 in debt because you told a federal judge you were destitute. Her face didn't move. It just slowly drained of color, like someone was pulling a plug somewhere below her chin. That's old, she said. Her voice had gone thin. That's been discharged. That's done. Page 4, I said. Schedule A and B. Assets. Schedule A and B. Assets. I tapped the line with my fingernail. You swore you had zero cash on hand. Zero savings. $2,200 in a checking account. That was the entirety of your declared liquid assets. 11 months ago, and 5 minutes ago on video, you swore you'd been holding $312,000 in cash for the last 6 years. My sister-in-law's eyes were ping-ponging between us, and I could see her mouth moving as she did the math. My mother-in-law's hand went to her throat. She'd started to tremble. I found it after the bankruptcy, she said quickly. In a coffee can. In the attic. Mr. Halverson raised one eyebrow. $312,000, ma'am. In a coffee can. A gift, she blurted. From a friend. Then it's income, Mr. Halverson said, with the gentle precision of a man delivering a diagnosis, which you failed to report to the IRS, the bankruptcy trustee, and the Social Security Administration, all of which constitutes additional federal offenses, and you've now testified to 2 contradictory origins of the funds within the same conversation on video. That's a problem. My mother-in-law tried to stand. She lunged for the affidavit. Give me that, she said. I want to take that back. Mr. Halverson placed his palm on the document. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said. This is sworn evidence. I have an obligation as an officer of the court not to allow it to be destroyed. You tricked me, she shouted. The pretense of warmth was gone now. You sat there and tricked me. I didn't trick you, I said. My voice did not rise. I asked you to sign a sworn statement attesting to the origin of certain funds. You chose to perjure yourself because you wanted my house more than you wanted to tell the truth. That's not a trick. That's a choice. She looked at my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law was crying, the loud, unattractive kind of crying that's mostly performance. The baby, she gasped. What about the baby? We have nowhere to go. Mr. Halverson very calmly slid a second document across the table. He kept his hand on the affidavit. Mom, he said, addressing my mother-in-law, I have a duty to report. I cannot sit on evidence of a federal felony. Before you leave this building, I will be electronically transmitting both the video of this proceeding and your signed affidavit, along with the bankruptcy petition you filed 19 months ago, to the United States Trustee's office in Burlington. They will, in the ordinary course of business, refer this to the United States Attorney for the District of Vermont. I would estimate a freeze on your remaining accounts within 72 hours. My mother-in-law's mouth was working, but no sound was coming out. And as for my sister-in-law, I said. I turned to her. You're not a tenant. You gained access to my property under false pretenses, with the assistance of your mother, who used a key that was given to my late husband for emergencies and was never authorized for transfer. The Vermont State Police have been provided with a copy of the property records and a written statement. They will be at the lake house by noon today. If you are still on the premises, you will be arrested for criminal trespass. My recommendation is that you go directly from this building to the property and remove your belongings. You have approximately 90 minutes. My sister-in-law made a sound I'd never heard a human being make before. My mother-in-law sat down hard in her chair, like her legs had stopped working. People are going to tell you, after a story like this, that I should have taken the high road. That I should have just changed the locks. That I should have offered them money to leave. That I should have remembered they were grieving too. That my mother-in-law had buried both her husband and her son in the space of 3 years. That mercy is what separates us from animals. Here's what I want to say to those people. Mercy is a gift you give to someone who's capable of receiving it. You don't pour clean water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. My mother-in-law had taken $68,000 from me to save her house and used it to buy her daughter Alexis. If I'd given her another inch, she'd have used that inch to take everything I had left. I wasn't taking revenge, I was performing surgery. I was removing something that, if left in place, would have eaten me alive. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was not. I looked at my mother-in-law one last time, the woman who had held me at my husband's funeral, who had whispered into my hair that I was the daughter she'd always wanted. You said something to me on Friday, I told her. You said I wasn't really family, not in the ways that matter. I want you to remember that you said that, because that's the only thing you've ever told me that turned out to be true. I picked up my purse. I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I want to tell you about the doorman. Sort of. We didn't have a doorman because the lake house wasn't a building, but there was a property manager who had let my mother-in-law in. His name doesn't matter, but I want you to know that the morning after the conference room, I called the homeowners association and I requested a full audit of the property access logs. He had let her in, based on a phone call from her, claiming that I'd asked her to come up early and air out the place. He hadn't called me to confirm. He hadn't even checked the owner contact list. He was fired by the end of the week, and the HOA opened an inquiry into whether he'd been paid to do it. I never found out the answer to that. I didn't need to. A lot of you are going to ask why I didn't just call the police on Friday afternoon when I came back from the grocery store and found them in my kitchen. I thought about that question for a long time afterward. The honest answer is that I was in shock. The dishonest answer that I told myself at the time is that I didn't want to make a scene. The deeper, real answer is that I had been trained my entire marriage to not make scenes with this family. I had been trained to absorb, to accommodate, to swallow it. The first instinct of a woman who has been quietly accommodating for 10 years is not to call 911, it's to find somewhere to sit down. I went to a hotel because that's what felt natural to me in the moment. I am telling you this so that if it ever happens to you, you know that what feels natural in the moment is not always what's right. Call the police. Call them immediately. I should have, and I didn't, and it cost me 4 days and a lot of legal fees I would have rather not paid. The fallout came faster than I expected. The U.S. Trustee's office didn't wait the full 72 hours. They moved within 36. My mother-in-law's bank accounts were frozen on a Wednesday morning. Her car was repossessed by Friday because the lender, alerted to the asset freeze, called the loan due. She was indicted 4 months later on 3 counts of bankruptcy fraud and 1 count of perjury. She took a plea deal. She is currently serving 31 months in a federal facility in Connecticut. She'll be 67 when she comes out. My sister-in-law gave birth in a women's shelter in Rutland. The baby was healthy. Social services got involved when she failed 3 drug screens, and the baby was placed temporarily with my sister-in-law's older cousin in Pennsylvania, the one who didn't know any of the family history. I sent that cousin a check, anonymously, every month for a year. The baby didn't choose any of this. The baby will not pay for it. I sold the lake house in May. I couldn't sleep there anymore. Every time I walked past the kitchen, I could see my mother-in-law in my bathrobe, with my grandmother's spoon in her hand. I sold it for $1.7 million, took the money, paid the capital gains, and walked away with about $1.1 million in cash. I bought a small place in coastal Maine, north of Portland, on a road most people can't find on a map. I changed my phone number. I deleted my social media accounts. I'm writing this from the porch of that house in October, with a cup of coffee on the railing, and the only sound is the wind moving through the white pines. I think about my husband almost every day. I think about how much he loved his mother. I think about how he never knew, not really, how she saw me. I'm glad he never knew. I would have spared him that even now. If you've ever had to cut someone off who shared your last name, hit subscribe and tell me below. Would you have signed the deed and walked away to keep the peace? Or would you have set the trap and watched it close? I read every comment. I'll be here. I've thought a lot in the years since I sold the lake house about how my mother-in-law ended up in a federal facility in Connecticut. The easy answer is that she got greedy. The truer answer is that she made a series of small choices over many years that all pointed in the same direction, and the morning she signed that affidavit was just the last domino in a line she'd been setting up since long before she ever met me. Cause and effect doesn't care how much you loved someone. It doesn't care that you held my hand at a funeral. The Lexus came from the bypass money. The bankruptcy came from the spending. The lake house grab came from the bankruptcy needing to be hidden. Every link in that chain was forged by her own hand, and when it finally tightened around her neck, the only person holding the other end was her past self. I want to say something honest about the woman I used to be. The one who wired $68,000 without asking a single question. I wasn't kind, I was scared. I confused those two things for a long time. Real kindness has eyes open. Real kindness sees the person in front of you clearly and decides, with full information, to give. What I was doing was buying peace. I was paying a tax to be allowed to stay in the family. And the moment I stopped paying it, the family showed me what I'd actually been buying, which was nothing. If there's something I want you to take from what happened to me, it's this. Develop the discipline to look at the people in your life the way they actually are, not the way you wish they were. That's the work of a lifetime, and it's harder than it sounds, because love wants you to be wrong. Love wants you to give people the benefit of every doubt. But there's a difference between loving someone and being a resource they extract from. You can love someone and still see them clearly. You can love someone and still close the door. The other thing I want to say is about endurance. People talk about strength like it's a single dramatic moment. The conference room, the lawyer, the trap closing. That's not strength. That's the visible part. The strength was the 4 days I sat in the Hampton Inn and didn't pick up the phone when my mother-in-law called. The strength was reading bankruptcy filings line by line at 2 in the morning. The strength was not screaming at her in the kitchen on Friday afternoon when I had every right to. Endurance is what makes intelligence usable. Without it, you have a clever mind and no follow-through, and the people who hurt you will keep hurting you because they know you'll fold. I'm 51 now. I live alone, on a quiet road in Maine, and I'm not lonely. There's a difference. I learned it late, but I learned it. The hardest people to leave are the ones who taught you to mistake fear for love, and the freest moment of my life was the one when I finally saw the difference and walked.